Hello there, warriors. I'm so sorry I'm not here today, but I wanted to record a video for you so we can continue day 2 of the research process. So hopefully you guys have this worksheet from the substitute. If you do not have this worksheet already, please get a copy. Some people are going to have a copy that is blank, just like this one, and then some people are going to have a copy that has a couple of things filled in. So regardless of whether or not you have something filled in, I'm going to suggest that you find a highlighter, especially if you do have a filled in copy. You must highlight specifics that are already filled in for you, so that way you can stress the importance. But even if you have to fill it in as well, I would suggest you getting a highlighter because a lot of these things are going to be covered on a test on Thursday. So please pause the video to make sure that you have a highlighter or the copy of the notes from the sub. With today's class, we're going to be talking about the research materials and just the different steps in the research process. So we touched on this a little bit yesterday, but I generally wanted to go over it to make sure that you understood the 8 basic steps and sort of figure out where today fits in. So we talked about yesterday about how you should choose a topic, something that you are interested in. Sometimes we are assigned a topic, but then other times we have that free choice, so it's good to have a topic that you're interested in. From your topic, you're going to generate a list of questions or inquiries about your topic. And so what that means is you need to decide what is important about this topic that I need to look up or want to share with my audience. That is going to help you with step number 3, where you narrow down your inquiries or you narrow down your questions that you specifically want to address just for your research. What's pertinent, what's relevant, what's important. And then that's where step 4, and that's today's lesson, kind of fits in, is how do you begin to look over this information and how do you make sure that these sources are credible. So that's what we're going to talk about today is step 4. So on your notes, it says to click on the vocabulary before you begin. So what I want you to do, if you were here on Friday, then you've already logged in, you've already joined the class, and you can just go straight in and watch the assignment for today. However, if you were absent on Friday, you're going to have to go to Friday's agenda. You're going to need to get the class code. You're going to need to create an account, and then you're going to need to join the class. It sounds really difficult, but just go to Friday's agenda, get the class code, and then create your own account so that way you can have access to vocabulary for the class. Then go ahead and just watch the video. Please pause this one right now because you're going to come back to it in just a moment. So hopefully you understand why it's important to have credible sources, and that's what we're going to focus on today, is just how do you pick out those sources? What kind are there, and what do I do with them? So there are 2 big categories of sources. If you take a look at your notes, 1 and 2, these are the words I want you to write in. Go ahead and write in primary sources and secondary sources. If you need to pause the video at any time to write them down, that may be a good idea, so go ahead and pause right now. But with your primary and secondary sources, they mean 2 completely different things, and you use them in different ways. First of all, with your primary sources, it is an immediate first-hand account of the topic. It's got to be somebody that had some kind of direct connection or something that had a direct connection to a specific event in question. So if you're talking about primary sources, you're talking about things like documents. It says texts of law or other original documents, like your Constitution, your Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, any kind of contract, like if you have to sign a contract in a classroom, those are primary documents. It also includes newspaper reports, whether the reporter witnessed an event or he or she is quoting someone who witnessed an event. Newspapers can become those primary sources. You have speeches by people, diary entries, letters, even interviews by someone who has experienced something. Those are primary sources. If you do any kind of original research, then you've created a primary source. And then you have things like survey data, whether it's the census or any kind of economic statistics. Those sorts of things can be considered primary sources. Think about primary. Primary means first, even with your primary colors. Primary just meaning just that direct connection to something. And so then you also have secondary sources, and secondary sources are one step removed from primary sources. It's almost like a primary source, except you have a second layer of interpretation or analysis. There's not that direct connection. It's just more of someone's interpretation of the event. And so this can be anything from, it says most books about a topic. It can be like textbooks. A lot of your nonfiction books in the library would be considered secondary sources. If you have any kind of scholarly articles about a topic, or just people not directly involved, documentaries, those sorts of things would be considered your secondary sources. So here it should say primary and secondary sources. Now we're going to talk about 3 different types of sources that you are going to use in your research. So here's going to be what it is, here's going to be what it means, and then here's going to be the example. So this is what we're talking about with these. You have print, electronic, and interview. So a print source is just a published source, like a book, a magazine, a newspaper, a newsletter, academic journal, periodical. It's something that you are holding in your hand. It is a published print source. So just think paper. It's going to be on paper. It's nothing on the internet. A print source is just your book or your journal. So the word print needs to go right here. When it talks about what it means, you're going to put published source right there, as it says in the definition. And then over here, one of these examples, it's going to go right here. You can put book, magazine, but it has to be something on paper, something that's been published. That's a print source. Your next one, of course, is electronic, and so you're going to put electronic under what is it, and the definition of it is basically just an internet website, anything with a URL. So under your example, you can just put anything with a URL. It's just an internet website. You even have databases of journals, which would make it an electronic source and not a print source because you can find it on the internet. And so those would be your electronic sources. And then you have interviews. And the definition of an interview, as silly as it sounds, is a personal meeting with a person. It just means personal as in intimate, just that one-on-one experience where you are asking somebody who has experienced something questions. And so they become one of your resources and one of your sources of information. And so for example, just put face-to-face consultation. Go ahead and pause here if you need to gather together that information. So you have those 3 types of sources that we're going to use, but it's important to know how solid that those resources are. So with print sources on paper, you need to ask yourself some questions. First of all, is this nonfiction? Because even historical fiction, while it is in part historically accurate, it also has just this skewed vision, or it's almost like your author is wearing blinders. They're only looking at events through a specific lens. It doesn't encompass the actual facts of what happened necessarily. It's just a person's interpretation of those facts. And so you also need to consider, what are the credentials of the author? Is this person credible? Does this person have the knowledge, have the experience to be an expert in this field? You need to consider when the book was published. Is it recent enough to be up to date? And then where and how did the author compile the information? So think about all of those things whenever you pick up a book, and you're going to use a book as one of your sources. Then for interviews, how reliable is the person that you're talking to? What are their credentials? How did they experience this event? What all did they experience of this event? And how accurate is the information that they are sharing with you whenever you stack it up or compare it to what other people's accounts of it are? So that will help you determine the validity of this source that you're using as far as the internet goes. And then the favorite one that you're going to talk about today is electronic sources, because yes, you have to go through what's called the CRAP test. Now, with the CRAP test, it is how you evaluate your electronic resources. And so this is actually an acronym. So we're going to write down what these things stand for and then what each of the letters mean. So not only what the word is, but then what the word means. So your CRAP test is where your information and reality actually come together. So that way we can see if it is a good resource or not. It's a way just to evaluate the information. You're looking at the different ways to gather information and you're thinking, is this really accurate, good information? So this is an acronym. Please don't even look at that picture. I can't even look at that picture and talk. But this is just a way for you to determine the credibility of your electronic sources. So here we go. This is what these stand for. Don't pause the video right now because you're going to get it in just a minute. But these stand for currency, which just means, is it current? Is it happening in recent time? Is it reliable? What is the authority of the person writing it, like your author? And then what is their purpose or point of view? So first of all, go ahead and write down currency for C. And when you're talking about currency, you can write down any of this information. How recently has it been published? When has the website last been updated? And is the information current enough for your topic? if you think about history in general, it pretty much doesn't change. I know that every now and then there's going to be new discoveries that come along, but that is more few and far between because history is pretty much solid in its representation. Like with King Tut, maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, they discovered some information that changed the way that people thought how he died. So that was a recent finding. But that rarely happens. And so if you have just something that within the past 10 years gives you information, then it's pretty much up to date. However, if you're researching anything in the medical field, it changes more frequently than in the past 10 years. So you may need to consider if it's going to be current enough for you to complete your assignment and your research. Your R stands for reliability. And what that means is this information reliable? Do you have citations there? Do they reference where they got their data? Is there any other research there that provides support, whether it's statistics? Is it mostly just opinions? If you see a lot of opinions, then chances are it's not very reliable. The A stands for authority. What are the author's credentials? What is their academic background? Are they an expert in a particular field, or is this just a journalist who likes to write on many different topics? You need to think about who the publisher is or who sponsors the publication of the website, and is this group reputable? Does that mean, do people respect this group? Why or why not would they respect the group? For P, with purpose, you need to think about why is this source created? What's the author's point of view? Is it mostly fact or opinion? Is there bias that's put into the information? What's the motivations for publishing this information? And then also, are they just trying to sway you in some way? So that is pretty much the CRAP test. And just because a resource doesn't pass or your source doesn't pass the CRAP test doesn't necessarily mean it is bad. It's just a way of you evaluating on your own. It's giving you the opportunity to look at the strengths and weaknesses of your sources, and you have to just kind of critically evaluate whether or not it's appropriate and up to date. So you will be doing the CRAP test momentarily. So let's take one more quick look at our notes. Before you do that, I want you to know just a couple of basic domains. And a domain is right up here. It's at the end of your URL. It's the last couple of letters. And they mean different things. And they also help to determine whether or not an electronic source could or could not be reliable. So we're going to go ahead and click on this link. And we're going to write down what these domains mean. And then you're going to read a little bit in just a moment to decide whether or not it is reliable. You're going to see that the .com stands for commercial site, so you can go ahead and write that down. Pause the video if you need. .edu stands for educational. .gov refers to government. And so basically this just means something that is in reference to our federal government, something that's been published. .org is just an organization. It's mostly meant to be credible and unbiased. And then you have .mil, which represents the various branches of our armed forces. And even though it's not on there, you can also take a look at .net. And by looking at .net, it's sort of like a catch-all for all the ones that don't fit under any of these other specific ones listed. And then it says right here, information from these sites should be given careful scrutiny, which means you need to kind of look at it closely to determine whether or not that is valid. So if you take a look back at your notes, it's asking you, is it reliable or not? You're gonna read a little bit to kind of determine that on your own. So I'm going to give you a chance once you're done with the video. You just get to click on this hyperlink. You can go back there and take a look at it. And so once you get to that point, then you are ready for today's independent activity. So what you're going to do is to go through 2 websites to determine, based on the CRAP test, if it is valid or not. You're going to run these 2 websites through this test. I need you to click on the document. You're going to make 2 copies to evaluate the website, and then you are going to add it back to today's assignment. So that way I'm going to be able to see how you did the CRAP test on these particular websites. So you're going to go through what the title of it is, what the URL is, and the title is just what's at the top. You're going to go through the C, the R, the A, and the P. And then you get to decide whether or not you think that it is valid. So just click on these hyperlinks in order to do that. Once you do both of them, add them back to today's assignment. I hope you have a wonderful day. Please know that you're missed. I'll see you soon.